Mutiny at Noxinview Mansion. The first thing Miss Abby saw when she woke up was the ceiling. Above her was a large staircase and a glass dome. Beneath her was a cold marble floor. Slowly, she moved all four limbs, making sure nothing was broken as she sat up, trying to remember what had happened. Miss Abby was thankful that no one had been around to see her in such an undignified state. And then she remembered. Elizabeth had chosen not to listen to her inner critic, and the other aspects had taken her side. It was mutiny. Miss Abby walked across the room to the doors, but found they were locked. She climbed up the stairs, her Oxford heels barely making a sound on the blue carpet. Everything was silent, and the large windows were foggy. She tried the door at each level. All were locked too. So this was how Sophie must have felt, she thought, calling to mind every time she had compassion locked up, before shaking the thought away and trying yet another door. Those wretched little ingrates, Miss Abby muttered, shaking the knob, trying to make it budge. She took a breath, mustering all the strength she could not to lose her composure. Even alone, the last thing she wanted to do was have a fit. She pulled a long hairpin out of her tight bun and attempted to pick the lock. Finally, after what felt like hours, she managed to open the door. Miss Abby walked briskly, long skirts swishing about her ankles down the hallway. The usual authoritative click of her high heels was gone, muffled on the carpeted floor. The corridor was lit dimly with antique lamps and picture frames lining the walls. However, there were no windows. She checked her pocket watch. How long had she been walking without seeing a door? The watch's second hand was still. Broken? Dead battery? Or was this some part of the mansion where time stood still? Miss Abby shuddered and continued until she saw a door. She sped up her gait, nearly running, and rushed to the door, only to find that she was back in the same room. She had gone in a circle. Stifling a cry of frustration, Miss Abby slowly descended the stairs. When she had Miss Sophie locked up, she had kept an eye on her. Perhaps the others were watching. Elizabeth? Sophie, Angel? Beatrice, this is not in the least bit amusing. Please tell me what the gist of this is. I am sure there is an alternative solution. Her voice echoed off every corner, but there was no reply. Miss Abby knew this room was somewhere in the middle or front part of the mansion, but the last place she'd remembered before waking up was her office, where she had been ambushed by the other aspects. Several hours earlier. Abigail, you are holding all of us back, Sophie cried, throwing a stack of papers back down on the inner critic's desk. Don't look at me that way, Miss Sophie. These allies Elizabeth has been consorting with may pose a threat to Noxinview's integrity, she said, raising a manicured brown eyebrow. Well, maybe some of us are sick of those goody-goody companies you want to stick with, Beatrice said with a scoff. Their values are what got us stuck in the Richard situation. That was Elizabeth's choice and Sophie's influence, Miss Abby retorted. Then these guys shouldn't be a problem if it all boils down to Elizabeth's choices. Beatrice threw her hands in the air. Does company matter or not? Listen, this is all Elizabeth's best interest regarding what is good for her life and soul. You all know by now that I do not compromise. These alliances must be cancelled. Miss Abby turned a cold glance over to Beatrice. I know what Sheila's biggest regret is. I need you to say something accusatory, something that will sting. She will never want to associate with Elizabeth again after that. I can't have you sabotaging my friendships. Elizabeth was appalled. First you sabotage her relationship with Richard, now this? Sophie shook her head. She had been lonely after Elizabeth's breakup, and any friends mattered to her. Listen, it was for a good reason we lost contact with these people after Port Royal banned us from associating with anyone related to Richard. Don't bring Port Royal into this, Beatrice sneered, pulling out her switchblade and shining it with the sleeve of her black hoodie. Noxinview is independent enough to make these choices without Port Royal's approval. Mergers are a way different from alliances. Will you at least burn that flag on Sheila's mantelpiece? Miss Abby cocked her head to the side, keeping eye contact with Beatrice. And risk lighting her house on fire? Elizabeth said, imagining how allowing Beatrice's usually suppressed pyromania would be a terrible idea. Beatrice scoffed. That's a tempting offer, Abby, but let me get this straight. If Sheila were to burn your religious icons or your Bible, you'd call that an attack on your faith. But damaging other people's property when you don't like it is somehow the Lord's work? Please, if someone burned your stuff, it wouldn't change your mind on anything. You'll only cling tighter to your beliefs. Oh, when did the lot of you get so overly tolerant? Miss Abby rebuked them. Do unto others? Sophie muttered. You don't catch flies with vinegar, and you don't make converts with violence either. It is what First Lady Eleonora would have done, Miss Abby insisted, raising her head. Most of what I learned came from her. And First Lady Eleonora turned out to be a hypocrite, Beatrice snapped. A lot of your mentors did. That's why I never trusted Richard Sr. and intercepted his messages. He gave off the same vibe. Zealots tend to have dark, sinful pasts, and they compensate for it with their self-righteous crap. We need to move on from First Lady Eleonora, said Sophie in her soft-spoken manner. We can respect her for who she is, but we must remember that she isn't always right. She saw through Richard, Miss Abby insisted. But it wasn't her place to tell us to break it off, said Elizabeth. Wrong things, right reason, Miss Abby muttered, turning her gaze towards the window. The skyline of Port Royal was visible from there, a pointy blue line on the horizon. Well, maybe we had a reason to call the whole thing off for Richard, but I can't have you sabotaging everything in my life you don't agree with. If I see anything that could turn harmful, I can always walk away, Elizabeth assured Miss Abby. I can say no to a second drink. I have a car now, so I can go home if I'm in a situation I know isn't safe. So far, these people have shown me nothing but support and kindness. No dangerous situations have happened. They're a ragtag bunch, but I'm welcome in their company. This sort of desperation led you to Richard. Miss Abby raised an eyebrow at Elizabeth and folded her hands. Desperation is dangerous. That feeling of wanting to belong and wanting human contact is making you blind. She turned to Sophie. And don't you think your goody-goody example is going to make any sort of difference? We must remember that to be human is to be fragile and capable of change. And not all change is good. We are not immune to corruption. She ain't wrong, Beatrice muttered, perching on an arm of a chair in the study and pocketing her switchblade. Now, are we canceling this alliance or not? I say no, Sophie answered. This was no surprise to Miss Abby. None of my associates have done anything that's worth cutting them off, said Elizabeth. As of right now, it's a no for me. Beatrice leaned forward and said, I think Sheila and the dudes are cool. For once, we're having real fun. Beatrice, not you too. Miss Abby sounded betrayed. No, I'm not sabotaging these guys. Elizabeth, Miss Abby snapped. Since when do you not listen to your inner critic? And Beatrice, even you? It's Beatrice, not Beatrice, first of all. Second of all, we're supposed to be working as a team now. A messed up team, but still. Since when was this a democracy? Miss Abby exclaimed. It was never supposed to be a dictatorship, Abigail. Miss Abby glared at Beatrice. So, all of a sudden, looking after Elizabeth's well-being, doing my job as a critic, conscience, and voice of reason, I am a dictator? I will not tolerate this disrespect from the lot of you. As a primary aspect, I must veto this decision you are making out of naive foolishness before Elizabeth falls off the straight and narrow. You may be the primary aspect, Sophie said, but you're still an aspect of Elizabeth. If any of us qualify to have veto power, it should be her. Miss Abby turned her back from the other three, letting out a bitter laugh as she did so. Unbelievable, she muttered. Who will run Noxinview? Who will guide Elizabeth? Not a spineless pushover and an unhinged savage. But as she said this, Miss Abby's image suddenly pixelated. She turned once again to face Elizabeth and her fellow aspects, but in the middle of this motion, Miss Abby vanished in a flash of pale blue light. Where did she go? Sophie's voice shook as she asked this, walking behind Miss Abby's desk and examining the floor. In limbo. Elizabeth shot Beatrice a suspicious glance. She was smirking, holding a silver oval in the palm of her hand. It was a swatching device. She had caused Miss Abby to teleport who knows where. Tris, what did you do? Elizabeth exclaimed as Beatrice strutted behind Miss Abby's desk and pulled out the chair, proceeding to sit on it sideways. You know how the mansion walls and staircases can be rearranged? Well, I was messing around with the customization the other day and just for kicks, sealed all the entrances to the courtroom's foyer. The swatch port there is still active, so all I had to do was set the coordinates, pickpocket Miss Abby's swatching key, which she left right over there, and send her on a little vacay before she tried banishing us. So, you mean to say she is locked up somewhere in the mansion? Elizabeth was stunned, unsure what to think of it. I don't think she was going to banish anyone, Sophie piped up. If anything, she was going to do all the sabotaging herself. But you were forced dormant once, Beatrice exclaimed. She knocked you out the day I burned Richard's bridge, too. Don't you see? She's getting a taste of her own poison. Maybe we can keep her there for a little bit, but she'll have to be let out eventually. What, so she can be back with a vengeance? Beatrice mumbled. Well, Sophie going dormant for 2 years turned out to be a mistake. Without our inner critic, our sense of judgment, there are sure to be consequences. Agent Viola has suggested removing each one of you at one point. Sophie for being overly attached, Miss Abby for being controlling, and you for being a threat to our safety, but I know all of you serve a purpose, so I won't let her. Well, I'll have to let her out, Triz. Being locked up is terrible. Okay, how about tomorrow? In 3 hours. 5 hours. The three of them took a seat in the study. Beatrice did not care, but it felt wrong to Sophie and Elizabeth to be in the critic's study when she was gone. Come on, said Beatrice. With old Abby gone for a bit, you can act without her influence. You don't need to be so quiet and rigid. You can dress in color, look chic, instead of wearing a turtleneck and blazer for her. Elizabeth and Sophie exchanged awkward glances. Being anything but quiet had gotten them into trouble, but being quiet all the time led to limited social experience. Wear that denim jacket or that faux leather one, Beatrice suggested. I didn't give you the idea to change your hair just so you could continue hiding it in a braid or a bun. You can be cool now. I need to tie back for work, Triz, and I work every day. Right, Triz frowned. But when you're with your new friends, allies, whatever side of the parallel you're on, you can look good without Miss Abby trying to dull you down. By the time we see anybody else, Miss Abby will be back, said Elizabeth. We agreed on a few hours, remember? Beatrice sighed frustration. Fine, but I'm going to make the best of these few hours and mess with her a little. She jumped off Miss Abby's chair, climbed over the desk, and straight out of the room. Sophie and Elizabeth followed, unsure of what was going on. Miss Abby stared up at the glass dome above her. It was still daytime. She knew there had been a locked door before the staircase. She was considered picking its lock, but it was gone now and replaced by a wall. A faint outline was the only reminder that a door had ever been there. She pushed at the section of the wall with all her strength in her thin frame, but it did not move. What have you been doing this whole time? A familiar voice asked from behind her. Miss Abby turned slowly. First Lady? This is impossible. Miss Abby turned back to the wall and pounded on it with a pale fist. Elizabeth? Beatrice? Sophie, I don't know who toyed about with the architecture configuration, but I demand the settings turn to normal at once. Abigail, there's no reason to shout like a savage, the First Lady scolded her. Walking closer, Miss Abby pulled back. You are not First Lady Lenora. This is a hallucination. A hallucination having a hallucination? The apparition cocked her head slightly to the side, raven curls falling to her shoulders. Now, how is that so? I don't know, Miss Abby tried not to stammer. I know that Beatrice and the others are playing some sort of cruel trick on me right now. Show me how you got in. I cannot remember how I did, but it should be the same way out. Please do lower your voice. The apparition placed her hands over her temples. You are giving me a headache. Maybe if you were smarter, you would have figured it out by now. There was a door here when I arrived. Now it's gone. What door, Abigail? There was never a door, you silly girl. Miss Abby stopped in her tracks. She was about to try the stairs again. I beg your pardon, First Lady? I'm not about to waste my time helping a stupid girl with something she could easily figure out herself. First Lady, the exits have all been sealed off. There's a window, the apparition pointed. Why don't you break it and climb out? Miss Abby cocked her head to the side. The apparition smoothed out her blue lace dress with indifference to her former protege. You did not come in by breaking a window and climbing in. I don't remember how I got in here, but it certainly did not involve breaking a window. I'm looking for the way I came in. Can you show me how you got inside? Listen, girl, do you want to get out of here or not? Just break the window. Miss Abby laughed softly. You threw a violent fit over a broken lamp once. Now it's suddenly okay to go about breaking windows. The past is irrelevant. She paused to examine the critic's confused expression. All right, fine, stay here. The apparition walked away from Miss Abby. And even if I broke a window, Miss Abby called out after her, the sills are too high off the ground to climb back onto. Abigail, lower your voice. Well, I'm tall and still can only... Enough, Abigail. Miss Abby's brown eyes were wide with shock. She had not been used to being spoken to in this way. As a matter of fact, she had forgotten that once she had also been a protege. Everything she had learned came from First Lady Lenora, the black and white thinking, the elegance and piety. Of course, Miss Abby was always grateful for what she had learned, though she couldn't help but see a reflection of herself in the apparition of Eleonora. Not only elegant and noble, but cold and condescending. Miss Abby collected herself and said to the apparition, I know you're not the real First Lady. Eleonora is in Port Royal. The likelihood of her not only coming to Noxinview uninvited and appearing in a sealed-off foyer is slim, so are you able to take a message back to the others? The apparition stopped in its tracks, turned to Miss Abby, and vanished without a word. The foyer began to get dark. She looked up and saw that the glass dome above was being covered, and the windows as well. Miss Abby ran back up the stairs and returned to the corridor. It was still lit by the antique lamps which shone on the pictures lining the walls. The first one she noticed was of a dance recital. All of Elizabeth's sisters were in it, but Elizabeth was on the side, not as a dancer. Miss Abby remembered this. She had been worried that Elizabeth had no spark. However, that did not bother her now. Elizabeth indeed had many other talents Miss Abby was able to work with. In another picture frame was a newspaper clipping. In her side of the panel, Elizabeth had not made the cut for the Gifted Students program. Miss Abby remembered the disappointment. She had always wanted to mentor a genius or a prodigy, but every year she was reminded that Elizabeth was utterly average. Miss Abby held her head up high. That had been years ago. Now finished with school, that was nothing to regret. Another clipping caught her eye, but she turned her gaze away and walked faster. She did not want to think about religious orders and the lack of closure regarding Elizabeth's qualifications. A photograph of Elizabeth and Richard caused Miss Abby to stop in her tracks. He was holding her close. She tore it off the wall and threw it onto the floor. The glass frame cracked, and Miss Abby composed herself once more, straightening her skirts. It was thanks to him Estrella had woken up. She regretted that Elizabeth had met that aspect. Little Aphrodite's very existence, she believed, was a stain on the girl's pure nature. Another frame held another news clipping. Rationing mandate will starve Noxinview, read the headline. She plucked it off the wall. It was only the Warriors column. She knew everything she was doing was perfectly reasonable. All of her inspirations had pushed themselves. Elizabeth has to be above average in everything, Miss Abby thought. In academics and faith, in all the arts she knows, mediocrity, she knew, will bring about nothing but rejection. No difference in Noxinview or in the world parallel to hers could happen with doing the bare minimum. Port Royal had once been criticized for its rules. Many called Eleonora a tyrant, but without strict rules, Miss Abby felt lost. What one representative considered freedom from the old formal dress code, Miss Abby considered a scandal. Continuing the practice of rationing was now considered starvation, though it was normal to Miss Abby to always fast. The First Lady pretended not to remember her old rules, or perhaps she had a poor memory and would now criticize Noxinview for practicing the same code she had once enforced. In spite of Elizabeth, the aspects and general discontent in Noxinview trying to put pressure on her to change her approach, Miss Abby was hesitant to do so. The city would not be as promising today without the strict mentorship given to its leaders. Change anything and all the virtues may be lost. She believed that she had no right to criticize First Lady Eleonora, either because she was to thank for Noxinview and Elizabeth turning out so well. Good children and good cities were things to work for, not wish for. If bringing about the greater good meant being perceived as a tyrant, Miss Abby thought, then so be it. She'd be their tyrant. She opened the door at the end of the hallway. She knew it led back to the foyer, but she did not expect the sight she literally stumbled on. The foyer was dark, but by the light of the corridor's lamp, she could see that the staircase was gone. The staircase was still inside the foyer, but it was folded back so she could not access it. There was now a drop. However, she could now see a blue light on the ground below. A glowing circle. It was a swatch port. Of course, there was no way in or out of this place except for the swatch port. Without the stairs, the only way to it was down. Miss Abby stood at the very edge of the floor, gripping the banister with her pale hands. The carpet, which had been on the stairs, was hanging loosely. It was connected to the carpet on the floor, so when the staircase had been moved, it was dragged off and now dangled to the bottom. There was nowhere to go but down, and she would need to climb for it. Miss Abby gripped both sides of the carpet, rolling it towards her and trying to maintain footing with the closest wall. She succeeded in descending 3 feet before swinging and taking a leap off the carpet, falling until she landed on top of the swatch pad. The dark room pixelated around Miss Abby, and there was a flash of light. In seconds, she was back inside her study. Miss Abby stood up and looked about. The other aspects were no longer there. The chair to her desk had been moved, and the drapes were all opened. She readjusted everything to its proper order, fixed her appearance, and looked about for the swatch port's key, but could not find it. No doubt the others still had it in their possession. She debated whether or not to take it back. Surely Beatrice would send her back, especially if she came in angry. Thinking back to when the large door disappeared and the staircase was moved across the foyer, Beatrice or any of the others must have customized the room's arrangements not long ago. Chances are they were still in the settings box. Miss Abby hesitated to leave her study and confront the others, but pushed herself to go anyways. It was simply not normal for a primary to be afraid of her own subjects. Why, it was not normal for a subject to discipline a primary. She would have to deal with Beatrice later. "Oh man, where'd she go?" Beatrice had been laughing hysterically as she watched the surveillance footage. She thought the look on Miss Abby's face throughout the entire ordeal was priceless. "Not so big and bossy now, huh?" Beatrice thought as Miss Abby swung off the carpet, long skirts flying before she disappeared in a flash of light. "You exposed the swatch port when you moved the staircase. Duh." Elizabeth pointed at the screen. Sophie's sharp ears picked up the sound of high heels walking down the hallway. "Gals?" Her voice trembled. "I think she's back." She pulled the swatch port's key out of her cardigan's pocket. She had been keeping it on hand whenever they were ready to set Miss Abby free, or whenever Sophie believed Beatrice's revenge was getting excessive. The door to the settings box squeaked open, and Miss Abby stood in the doorway. She said nothing. Her face showed next to no expression. All she did was snatch the key out of Sophie's hands and walked out, her head still high, though she'd been humiliated. "I guess playtime is over," said Beatrice with a shrug, as Elizabeth hit reset on the foyer's layout.